Hello and welcome to the Bio360 podcast. And this is the third part of my interview with Dr. Tom Cowan, and we're talking about why the heart is not a pump. And actually, now at this point of the conversation, we try to find out what is actually the heart, what does it do for us, and yeah, we're going. We talked about the sun and the moon and electromagnetic fields. And there is a lot more to discover, and now we're going to jump into it. Hi, Tom.
Hi there.
Yeah, I already mentioned it. The heart is an endocrine organ. Is that true, and why is that?
It's a good question and an interesting question. I'm, however, going to say that I didn't write about this at all in my book, and I don't consider myself an expert or even particularly conversant in the endocrine function of the heart. The reason I say that, besides it's maybe a bit of sloth on my part for just not looking into it, but my role in this, I hear all the time from, more sort of now we're talking about more holistic and progressive thinkers and scientists in this area. So they say all the time, yes, the heart is a pump, but it's also an organ of perception. The heart is a pump, but it's a neuroendocrine organ. The heart is a pump, but it's the organ of love and acceptance. I hear this stuff all the time. My only comment on that is the fact that you think the heart is a pump means you don't understand the basic function of the heart, which allows one to then understand why being an organ of love or acceptance or perception actually makes sense given what the heart is actually doing, and including even as a neuroendocrine organ. Neuro means it's the seat of basically the function of the nervous system, which it has something to do with, which I even gave a theory on that having to do with the sort of interesting properties of gold. But my main, influence on that conversation is somehow people have to get off of that first acceptance. The heart is a pump, but immediately you lose me, because then you don't understand what the heart is doing, and then the rest of it doesn't make any sense.
Okay, got it. You mentioned gold now a couple of times. Are we talking about this like monoatomic, also called Ormus kind of gold?
Right. Ormus gold means it's single atoms of gold, or sometimes two atoms, as opposed to gold salts, which is the usual form of gold. And again, people say, well, this guy has a heart of gold. And I can guarantee if you're a heart surgeon and you dissect the guy's heart, you will find no gold salts in his heart. So why do we have this millennia-old connection between the heart and the gold? And I think it's because the gold can actually exist in these two forms. One is this salt, and the other is this high-spin single atoms. And this high-spin single atom form of gold is what's called a superconductor, which means it conducts electricity basically at the speed of light, which then resolves the anomaly for me that we're told that the nerves, which control muscle function and sensation, that they have a chemical basis for their action, yet the chemicals are clearly too slow to function in the way that we all know the human body functions. In other words, for you to send if you burn the bottom of your foot, you feel it instantaneously in your being. And if this was mediated through the movement of chemicals, that simply could not be the case. There has to be some other superconducting element, And one of my suggestions, I certainly can't prove this because nobody's really looking into it, but that it could be based on this monoatomic gold, which is a superconductor in other situations. And one of the reasons I wonder about that is because the predominant way to create this monoatomic form of gold is to put gold into a vortex. Then it in certain situations will assume this monoatomic form, be able to act as a superconductor, and there you've got it. And so I wonder whether this very fine amount of gold, this very small amount that circulates in our blood, is converted in the vortex of the heart into this superconducting form to form a kind of skeleton or blueprint of the instantaneous conduction phenomena of any living organism. Again, I certainly can't prove that's true, but that never stopped me from postulating it and hoping somebody else does prove it someday.
Yeah, certainly interesting. So is there any evidence for that? You said we have gold salts in our body.
Yeah, I mean, we have a minute amount of gold, just like we have a minute amount of every element that originates in the oceans, and there's a tiny amount of gold in the ocean water.
Sure, but you said the heart vortexes the blood, and then it creates the monoatomic form out of that. Is that actually something that we can see under the microscope?
No, because it's very difficult to even measure monoatomic forms. As far as I know, that's never been definitively proven. So I would be clear that it's a theory that I have about why there's even a connection alchemically with the sun and the gold and the heart, and what these alchemists were looking for when they were trying to create gold. I mean, Isaac Newton, one of the most renowned scientists of all time, spent the vast majority of his life trying to create gold. So either he was completely stupid, or he needed to pay his bills because he needed to make gold, or, which I don't think is true, or he was looking for this other form of gold, which is the electrical foundation of consciousness, which might even be the seat of immortality. And that's a whole nother question, but that's what this was about. And, we're talking, the people who believe this include, Goethe, Shakespeare, Isaac Newton, and everybody else that you've ever heard of. I sometimes say, if you want to live on after your death as somebody who influenced how we think, you better believe this stuff, because if you don't, nobody will ever remember who you are.
Yeah, and the Egyptians also did,
Yeah, the Egyptians. It's, the story of the Old Testament is all about monoatomic gold. Yeah. This is the story of humanity, is the search for the consciousness that is connected with this higher, electrical form of gold. Now, and to prove that is tricky business. A lot of smarter people than me certainly have been after it for, 5 millennia at least.
Does that actually touch on levitation? Is that already connected?
Yes.
Or is levitation more tied to the force phase of water, or where is that? In which direction are you going with your new book?
I'm talking about how, in particular, cancer is a cytoplasmic disease, and the cytoplasm is organized water. That's the foundation. Now, levitation, interestingly, when you convert physical gold salts into this high-speed monoatomic form, it does create a levitation-like phenomena. And there has been a number of studies that actually confirm that the weight doesn't match, and nobody knows where the other mass has gone, where the other weight has gone. And you can even levitate the scale tray that the gold is sitting on to a certain extent. It's complicated, but to a certain extent.
Okay. Yeah. I think we gotta make another podcast about how nerves work, how levitation works. There's so much I want to touch on, but yeah, we have already talked quite a bit.
Yeah,
I got still a few more questions. For example, there's a relationship to the fist. What is it?
To what?
From the heart to the fist. The fist has exactly the same size as our heart, right?
Exactly right. Exactly.
Yeah. Is that just a curious, just an interesting fact, or is there anything more about to say that?
I mean, there's no coincidences really, and there's no just that just so happens. All I can say, I can't tell you exactly why that is, but one of the most interesting lectures that I ever heard was actually the only time in my life I was in Germany. I was at a conference in Stuttgart in 1988, and I heard a lecture by, I can't remember his first name, I think it was Friedrich Husemann, who's one of the family of Husemann physicians who are also concert pianists. And he gave a talk on the musical formation of the human body. I would encourage anybody who's interested in what and how the human body is formed to look into that, because the human body is formed on exactly musical principles. And I don't know that I can go into the details of that, except if you look at like the bones of the arm, they exactly mirror the mathematical relationship of the instruments of the octave. Another example, easier to follow, is when we're born and when we're like 5, we have 20 so-called baby or first teeth. And at that point, most of the children's songs, lullabies, infant songs, are written in the scale of the fifth, or the pentatonic scale, so-called. Mm-hmm. Then we transition into 4 sets of 8 teeth, in other words, 32 teeth, which mirrors the octave. And then adult songs tend to be written in the octave, which mirrors the musical formation of our teeth as adults. And there are literally scores, if not hundreds, of connections like that. My guess is there's a musical connection between the heart and the size of the fist, but I can't give you the rendition of that off the top of my head.
Okay. Yeah. I looked this guy up that you mentioned because I had the feeling that it might be actually the son of Hachenay, but it's actually not, because the son of Hachenay kind of continues the work, but I just can't get hold of him, and he also plays the piano.
Yeah.
Or no, he plays the harp. That's yeah, the thing.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah. Maybe we can touch quickly a little bit on like some questions and critics about it. For example, there's some people would say like, okay, you say, we mentioned, or we talked about why the heart is not a pump and what is actually moving the blood. But then people would say, yeah, nobody in medicine actually believes that the heart is only a pump, because we have muscle movement, we have vein pumps, we have like little valves in the veins and in the arteries that by movement is actually then facilitating the blood flow. What are you saying to that?
Let me say it like this. So you mean, and I don't mean you in particular, but I'll just say the word you for shorthand. So you mean that that the reason for the movement of blood is because of these muscular contractions. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
So that therefore means if you come upon somebody who has paralyzed legs, the blood in their legs won't move, right?
Yeah, I think that mean it's like both. You know, it's the heart is pumping it, but then it goes a certain way, and then the valves close, and then you move a little bit, and then somehow that's my understanding. I'm not
So
I'm not buying it really, but
right. So this is another area of cognitive dissonance. So the theory is that I've heard, the reason the blood moves is because the contraction of the muscles around the blood vessels. Now, I'm sure
that's also the theory for the lymph, isn't it?
Yes, there's probably some contribution of that. But again, so here's the cognitive dissonance part. That's what we think. And so here's how to test it. Go find somebody who has no leg muscle movement. In other words, they're paralyzed from the waist down. That person, therefore, should have dramatically decreased movement of the blood in their veins. The reality is they have almost no difference in the movement of the blood in their veins. Mm-hmm. So one's actual experience, all you have to do is ask them to take their pants off and look at their legs. And if they had no venous movement, their legs would be 5, 10, 20 times bigger than normal. The fact of the matter is they may be a slight amount bigger, but it's almost no difference. Therefore, that theory can't possibly be true.
Okay, that's a good good explanation. One more thing I'm interested in, like, what does an artificial heart do? I mean, we can't really touch on heart disease because that's a huge topic, and you know a lot about this stuff, but it's just getting too much. So, but if I have an artificial heart, so my heart failed for whatever reason, and now I'm getting artificial heart, why do I actually need that? Or how can, well, let's put it that way, how can somebody with no understanding of how the heart works build a machine that is put into that place in the chest and that actually works?
Well, first of all, it doesn't work very well. So that's the first thing to say. The life expectancy is horrible. The second thing is, since I wrote the book, I also found out something that's very interesting. And this was from a group of Spanish cardiac surgeons and cardiologists. And they said, based entirely on the dissection of the heart, in other words, on the anatomy of the heart, they came to the independent conclusion. I don't think they ever heard of me or Bronco First or Rudolf Steiner or any of this stuff. They said it's the function of the heart is to create the vortex. There is no possibility of pumping of the heart based purely on dissection. But then they said, very interesting, when the heart gets into what they call a death spiral, in other words, you can picture the heart as sort of a tube that creates this vortex. And as the heart gets sicker and weaker, it assumes a more globular shape, right? You can picture that? Instead of a tube, it becomes like a globe. Mm-hmm. At that point, it loses its vortex creating capacities. So what does it have to do? It starts to pump, meaning it can't create a vortex. It has to try to increase momentum of the blood. So its only choice is to try to have a mechanical squeezing of the walls of an organ which is in no way suited for this sort of activity.
How can it switch then to that?
It has no choice because just there's too much fluid in this globe. Essentially, picture like a balloon that you go from a tube to a circular balloon, and it has to start squeezing the walls in order to get some forward motion of the blood. Now, the problem is, the reason they call that a death spiral is because it's such a horribly inefficient way to add momentum to the blood, and B, you start to use an incredibly high amount of energy in order to accomplish this mechanical pushing, that the body starts shunting all its energy to the heart instead of using it in the normal way. And eventually what happens with these people sorry, I got something caught in my throat there. Eventually what happens is they end up getting emaciated and die of congestive heart failure. So what that means is, interestingly, there is a deep backup plan for the heart, which is when all else fails and you have to move the blood, you can start using the muscles to try to push. And if you do that and you can recreate that with using an artificial heart, which has the benefit of not using energy because it's not living, and you can keep somebody alive for a short period of time in a kind of miserable state.
Okay, but how does the artificial heart then actually is powered? Because it has a battery, and I mean, yeah, but if
at least it doesn't suck the energy from the rest of the body like a normal failing heart does.
Yeah, okay, but we said we need a massive pump to actually pump 7 liters of blood. I think it's 3 times around the world per day. Is that per day, right? So how is that actually then happening with a tiny little electric pump with a battery inside?
Yeah, not very well, I can tell you that. So, so the other thing that happens, they pointed out, is the arteries start making vortex-like motions to try to compensate. So there is a sort of deep backup plan of motion that comes into effect here, which is, as I said, it's a death spiral, and people don't usually emerge from that.
Okay, and so we still have the force phase of water going on and all this kind of stuff.
Right,
so exactly. we have a lot of contributing factors to actually kind of keep us going a little bit, or even if it's like not very.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thomas, can you go to like a conference of cardiologists and talk about these things? And is that possible to talk about this freely?
They don't invite me, but I could if they did.
Have you done it?
I mean, I've given talks all over the country about this, not in front of cardiology groups, but I mean, we have a medicine that we're introducing into the United States to treat heart disease, which is something we haven't talked about. And I have 2 cardiologists who do support my view of the heart and support my way of treating heart disease, who are organizing, clinical trials of this. And so that may become the avenue by which I speak about the heart in general, more about heart disease and treatment. But I can certainly touch on this. There's also a documentary movie being made in Germany about this whole area of what does the heart do, and the heart is not a pump. So that might contribute to getting this more widely known. Who knows?
Oh, really? Is it?
Yeah.
Who's doing that?
A guy named Benedict Just, and it's called Dawn of Hearts. I don't know if that's the name of the movie or just the website, but Dawn of Hearts is the title or something like that.
Yeah, okay. That's something to look for. Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Tom, what does your heart move right now?
I like growing food. That's that's my happy place. I have a huge garden, and I sort of push to grow all my own food and supply as many of my friends and family and neighbors with as much food as possible, it somehow gives me more joy than just about anything else.
Okay. So you do that physically, or, I mean, it's you in the garden? Yeah.
I mean, my wife helps, and Esteban helps us some, and a few other friends come and help us. But we grow a lot. I mean, we have an acre garden, and that's what I spend a lot of my time doing these days.
Yeah. Yeah, in the sunlight, in touch with the microbiome of the earth, and
yes.
grounded, and in movement, and yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Good idea. And yeah, where can we find you in the internets?
For this subject, the best is humanheartcosmicheart.com. There's a lot of articles by mechanical engineers that call it "The Heart Is Not a Pump," what causes heart attacks, all about Strophanthus. I've written a number of articles myself, and there's other things posted. There's an article by Bronco First there. We also have my family, we grow and source different vegetables, and we make them into powders, and we sell them widely in the United States, maybe some other places. And that website is called drcowansgarden.com, which is drcowansgarden.com. And it's a very exciting venture for us, and doing quite well, of basically making vegetable powders out of vegetables.
Yeah, so you can enrich your food actually with like a lot more vegetables than most of us are eating, right? Is that the idea?
Not just quantity, but we get wild vegetables and perennial vegetables, and the best vegetables that either we grow, or we have biodynamic farmers grow them, or local foragers. It's all about quality.
Yeah, and I guess increasing the diversity.
Increasing diversity and quality. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, sounds good. Sometimes I wish I would be living in the US.
Sometimes I wish I wasn't living in the US. Grass is always greener.
That's true. Tom, that was amazing. For me, that was like something, I mean, I've been waiting for this moment for 15 years, and I just can't tell you how grateful I am that you've been in my show. Great.
Well, I appreciate your support, and anything I can do for you, let me know.
Yeah, you could. We could talk about levitation, for example. It's interesting because Jerry Pollack is also writing a book about this, and that is it's going to be an interesting topic. Maybe I drop you an email when your book is out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming to the show, and have a nice day.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.